Right, evening everybody. It is Monday 19th of December and I'm in a good mood because I had the day off work and I've got tomorrow off work, and tomorrow I'm going to go to the cinema with my kids and see Moana. So I'm very excited because apparently it's fantastic and I like Disney films. So yeah, all things good. Back at work on Wednesday, so my mood is probably not going to be that much better tomorrow night. So 2 tonight and 2 French. We've got a few more French to go through. And these 2 were both donated by Andrew A.P. Butler. Thank you very much for these. Now, when I was sort of going through the list of samples and what I was trying to get, and I'd got these 2 from Andrew, and they're both, you'll actually notice that they've both got the same kind of printout label, because this is actually a sort of flag of Brittany or Breton. So I was like, okay, cool, you know, two whiskies from Breton. But it turns out they're actually from the same distillery. So technically speaking, I am trying to do 366 separate distilleries and brands, but brands as well. So these are 2 quite distinctly different releases from the same distillery. So I'm going to count them as 2 separate brands. I have done the same earlier on in the challenge. I did it with the, even with, oh God, what was it? Armoric. With the Galeg, which was their blended version from the same distillery. So I'm going to count these as 2 separates because I need all the help I can get. And I'm nearly at the end of the challenge and I haven't got time to try and find any more. So my pronunciation is probably pretty rubbish, but I think it's Glann Ar Mor, because there's quite a Celtic influence in Brittany and Breton. Breton is a kind of dialect, and there seems to be Celtic influences in it. So I think it's Glann Ar Mor, which means by the sea or at the edge of the sea. So the reason it's called that is because the distillery is here, and as you'll see, it is slap bang on the coast of Brittany. Now, as one of my viewers pointed out when I was talking about where Armoric was, Brittany isn't a peninsula off the east of France, it's the west. My maths is pretty rubbish, my pronunciation is pretty shocking, and geography has never been my strong point, as with Breton whiskey yesterday. So yes, thank you for pointing that out, whoever, I think was it Charlie Kavai? I think one of you guys anyway, but yes, I know, but you know, it's when you're doing it on a daily basis and you're doing this research literally 15 minutes before you're shooting the video, you're gonna get stuff wrong. I'm amazed I've not got much I'm amazed I've got as little as I have wrong, like totally incorrect as I have done, because generally I tend to really screw things up. So Brittany, Breton, west peninsula of France, and this is right on the coast. So we'll start with Glann Ar Mor, and then the other one is this one called Cornog, which is a peated version. So the distillery itself was set up. It was the company. It was called the Celtic Whisky Compagnie, and it was a couple called Martin and Jean Donnet. Whether Donnet were anything to do with the shoes and tennis rackets, I don't know. I couldn't find out too much information about them, but they created Glann Ar Mor in 1997, but the distillery itself wasn't actually operational until June 2005. So my guess is that they were using stocks from somewhere else, another distillery, to release while they were setting up their own distillery. So 2005 is when it became operational, and the first release, which was Glann Ar Mor, was late 2008. So it was a 3-year-old, and it's sort of like small batches. It's a very much a craft distillery. So it's like single casks worth of stock that come out. So it's limited numbers of bottles. I haven't even been able to find prices of these 2, with good reason, because in 2015, so last year, you're looking at August of last year, they actually closed the distillery down. And it's not because they ran out of money, it's not because they went bankrupt. Sales were actually pretty good, and it gets a little bit complicated. With France, you have it's like a national institute that look at origins, and basically it's like a protection. It's almost like a protection order against regions of food and wine food and drink production, to kind of maintain consistency and also quality. So Champagne is a protected region where only champagne that's made in the region that adhere to certain criteria can then have champagne on the label. Similar with cognac, similar with other, it's a bit like through the EU, you know, Cornish pasties have to come from Cornwall, this sort of thing. And what Glann Ar Mor and a couple of other distilleries in the area, I think there were 4 of them, so Armoric's probably one of them as well, was they went to this institute and said, we want to get an equivalent for Brittany whiskey from Brittany, to be able to kind of maintain a level of quality and assurance to people that are buying it that it does maintain these regulations. Now it turns out that these regulations that were being put in place actually made it become impossible for Glann Ar Mor to continue operation in a substantial way that was actually to their benefit. And basically it was a way of it boiled down to a fact that if they weren't in order for them to do it, in order for them to carry on their business operations as they are doing it now, they'd either have to get rid of their stills, or if they weren't going to do that, because the stills that they use, I think it's alembic stills that they use, weren't actually what I think it's INAO, it's something like Institute National Origin, something, weren't allowing them to use those stills. So it was a case of, if you carry on using them, you can't then call yourself Brittany whiskey. So you can't have Brittany anywhere on the label. You can't even have a map of where you are. You can put your address on the label, that's it. And it just became so unworkable for them that they decided it's not worth it. It's absolutely not worth it. Now, Martine and Jean Donnet are also responsible for the upcoming opening, and it might even be operational now, of a new distillery on Islay called Gartbreck. So it may even be a case of, do you know what, we've got Gartbreck going on, this is too much hassle, this is just a ridiculous amount of proper red tape regulations, just making it so difficult for them that it's a case of we either continue, we change our entire structure. It had to be barley from Brittany, they're wanting to do a rye whiskey, they can't do that because it has to be barley and nothing else. So it was sort of, these 4 distilleries with the best of intentions grouped together and went, we want to do this kind of regulation in place so that we can have Brittany whiskey that has this protective order around it, where it means that we have integrity almost. And then it turns out that the people that came up with these regulations have kind of screwed them over, and they've actually made it, from what I gather, they've made it a lot easier and a lot more favourable for much bigger name producers, whereas for the small scale craft distilleries like Glann Ar Mor, no chance. It's just nigh on impossible for them without forking out a lot of money that they simply can't afford. So, as far as I'm aware, Glann Ar Mor closed down last year and is not operational. Now, the website, which is in French, doesn't really give any... My French isn't brilliant, along with geography and maths and pronunciation and all this lot. But there wasn't anything kind of screaming out at me in terms of we are now closed. It was kind of a generic history and this is who in French, so I was kind of struggling through it. But it wasn't really giving me an indication that it is shut. So I'm working on the assumption that it's closed, which is why I can't find any prices for this. I have absolutely no idea. Couldn't find it. So if anybody does know roughly how much these are going for, because like the Whisky Exchange were just having out of stock, notify me when it arrives. So I think I'm pretty damn lucky to get both of these. So Glann Ar Mor, unpeated, bourbon cask, released in small batches, and it's sort of it's kind of like not annual batches, but this is the 3rd release, this is the 4th release, so I don't actually know which one this is. So this is a bottle of Glann Ar Mor that I found. Whether the labellings have changed and things like that, whether this matches the one that Andrew's given me or not, I don't know. So I'm going to do these separately. I shall do Cornog as a separate video, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about the information about the distillery because I have just done it. And it's late and I need to go to bed. So I'm very intrigued to see what this is like. And I'm hoping that if it's going to be any good, this could be a good indication of what Gartbreck could be like on Islay. So it's pretty young. If we're looking at 2005 when they started, the first release was a 3-year-old released in 2008. Yes, we could be looking at 10-year-old, but I would probably go for, to be 10-year-old, it would only be just 10-year-old. So you're probably looking at between 6 to 8, something like that, 6 or 8-year-old, depending on how long Andrew's had this. Andrew, if you're watching, you might know how old this is exactly. It might, whether there's any information on the label, that sort of thing. So if you can put it in the comments in terms of the details that you've got of these bottles that you've sent me, that would be absolutely fantastic. But a very pale colour. So I'm fairly certain that they've not added any colouring to it. Very pale, almost kind of a light greeny tinge. Bourbon cask, ex-bourbon casks that have been used. But whether that's like refill bourbon or even kind of second fill or something like that, because that's really quite a pale colour. In terms of the percentage, I didn't actually double check that thinking about it. So let me just double check to see. Glann Ar Mor, I really hope it's pronounced Glann Ar Mor. 46%. So, it's quite fresh. Really is quite fresh, and it does have a little bit of saltiness to it. Not overly sea saltiness. It's not obvious that it's on the coast, but there is a touch of sea salt in there, and a bit of black pepper as well, actually. But we're not talking Talisker levels of pepperiness, but there is just a slight hint, kind of like salt and pepper sprinkled on top of something, but something very fresh. There's a slight sweetness to it. There's a very clean, sweet, almost candy floss, slight mintiness to it, but there's salt and pepper there as well. It's quite delicate, but I like this nose. I really do. It's very fresh and invigorating, and it really clears your nose out, but in a very good way. That's nice. There is a nice sweetness to it that's just pulling everything down a little bit, so it's not too sharp and too sour, but it's balanced really, really well. I like that a lot. Very, very spring-like on the nose. Interesting. More saltiness comes through, but there's a slight smokiness, which is weird because I thought this was unpeated. But there is a very, very soft smokiness, really soft. You know, it's not. You've got an Islay whiskey. It's very subdued, but it's just there, just underlying in the background. It's quite delicate. There's not a great deal on the finish, unfortunately. It's very delicate, but that freshness is still there. So there's a touch of mint, there is a little bit of saltiness, there is a bit of pepper, and it's freshly ground black pepper as well. The soft sweetness is there, but there's just this very underlying, very sweet smoke, kind of like a Bunnahabhain sweet smokiness to it, which just lifts everything a little bit more than what's on the nose. It's very, very drinkable. It's quite light. It dies off a little bit quick on the finish, and a little bit too quick for me. It would be nice if it just drew through a little bit more, just a bit more of this, because there's quite a lot going on. There's salt, there's pepper, there's a soft sweetness, and it's a nice kind of spun sugar sweetness to it. There is a slight mintiness, but it's like a soft mint. Soft, sweet, chewy mint almost. This really, really soft, subtle smokiness, almost unnoticeable, but it's just there, and it just gives everything a nice counterbalance. It really is a spring whiskey, or being sat outside on a summer's day, it would be probably quite pleasant, lightly chilled as well, just ever so slightly chilled. I'm not sure I'd put ice in it, but I'd certainly put the bottle in the fridge and pour it from there. And it would probably go, if you were going to mix it, with just a dash of soda water just to make it a little bit longer. But that's nice. I do like that. That's very pleasant indeed. It's almost refreshing. It really is a bit of a palate cleanser as well. In between courses of a meal, that sort of thing. It very much is a kind of. It would work quite well between an appetizer and an entree. Sounding very American there. A starter and a main course. Especially if you had something like a fish appetizer, and then your main course was a little bit richer and with a little bit of a smokiness, so kind of like a meaty dish, because this actually goes quite well from the sea to the land. It's quite a good sort of crossover between the two, because it starts off quite fresh and salty, and then moves with this sweet smokiness that's there into a slightly more meaty palate at the end. I do like that a lot. That's very, very good indeed. So if you can find it, because by the sounds of it, if they are closed, it's going to get even more harder to find it because they weren't making an awful lot in the first place. It is well worth picking up if you do like your delicate whiskies. Very, very tasty indeed. Right, so quick rinse out, and then I should go on to Cornog, which is the peated version. So I'll see you at the next one. Cheers.